Welcome to today's webinar, How Anticipating Users' Needs Transforms the IT and User Experience. My name is Nick Thompson, Product Marketing Manager here at Jamf, and we're doing something special here. We've got a couple of guests with us. I want to introduce both of them. First off, with Code 42 here, we have Abik with us. Hi.
Hi, Nick. Very nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And joining us remotely as well, too, is Chris from Brewster Academy. Chris, welcome.
Hey there. Great to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for joining. We're going to be talking all about Brewster Academy's story here through the lens of both Jamf and Code 42, which would be great. So let's take a look at our agenda. First off, we're going to do just a brief overview of Jamf and Code 42 as companies and the different products that we offer. Then we're really going to have Chris tell his story, and he's going to talk about how anticipating users' needs really led Brewster Academy to both Jamf and Code 42 as technology solutions. Then Chris will dive into best practices for creating a culture that really relies on self-service, this culture of self-sufficiency. And then he'll talk about how, what Brewster's IT team considers when introducing new technology to the school, and what the future of Jamf and Code 42 looks like at Brewster Academy. We'll, of course, wrap up with some next steps, and we'll do some Q&A as well, too. So please feel free to submit any questions that you might have via WebEx here into the Q&A, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So just a brief overview of Jamf for those who aren't familiar with us. We help organizations succeed with Apple. This is our mission. And we've been doing it now for about 15 years. And we do it with our two products, Jamf Now, which is really simple mobile device management, no IT required, great for smaller organizations, and Jamf Pro, Apple management for IT professionals. You can kind of see the two side by side here. Again, Now all about easy device setup, simple management, really no complexity, versus Pro, which lets you do the complete lifecycle management of Apple devices from deploying them, getting the right settings on their apps, inventory, security, etc. And you can see just kind of how the products look here. Everything is all web-based, so you just simply access everything through a modern web browser. And just some stats about us, too. We now support over 13,000 organizations to manage over 9 million Apple devices. You, of course, see us in some of the traditional Apple markets like big tech companies, marketing firms. But you also see us in the top Fortune 500 companies, top valuable brands, and something that we are very proud of and that we love to support are schools, the education market, which, of course, Apple has supported for a very long time as well, too. Enough about Jamf. I want to turn it over to Abik here real quickly to talk about Code 42.
Thank you very much, and hello to everyone that's joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here. So let's just talk a little bit about Code 42. And from a company perspective, just for those of you that are unfamiliar with us, we've been around since the early 2000s. We currently have over 550 employees, and some of our customers, and we have about 47,000 enterprise customers, some of which include 7 out of 10 of the largest tech companies, as well as 7 out of the 8 Ivy League schools. And in terms of the business challenges that we solve, really think of it as 3 buckets that we'll get into here soon. And they revolve around backup, being able to very quickly restore data when you need it most, and security analytics. Security is obviously a big deal. We live in a security-centric world today. So in addition to some of the certifications that you see here on screen, Code 42 has invested heavily in taking our backup experience into more of a security-centric model, if you will, where many of our customers are using the backup as kind of the backbone to providing more security analytics. Scalability is huge. I mentioned the number of customers we have. This is growing. We have over 480 petabytes of data that we currently store for our customers securely. And lastly, adoption, right, which is also related to security. Our customers are all about deployment flexibility. Some might prefer to store data on-premise, while some would leverage our Code 42 web, or I should say Code 42 cloud experience. So it's all about providing them the level of flexibility they need based on security. Shifting to our product, so think of it as 3 central categories: data protection, data recovery, as well as data visibility. On the data protection side, our philosophy as a company is to back up your data every 15 minutes by default. That's for every user, every file, everywhere. We believe that unforeseen events can occur anytime, and your best window of opportunity to recover data when that happens is by backing up your data every 15 minutes. Now, being able to do that allows us to provide even more capabilities around legal hold, for example. So from an e-discovery perspective, many of our customers are looking at additional ways to collect data for the purposes of legal hold, which is something that fits into our data protection category. Data recovery, it's all about being able to restore what you need when you need it the most, right? So we've invested, again, heavily on providing a platform that can provide you with lightning fast recovery, but also enabling your users to self-recover as well. And we've made that by having a very easy experience for them to be able to self-recover that data, as well as capabilities around if ransomware were to hit unexpectedly, how quickly can you recover? The last point I'll mention here very quickly is around visibility, and this has been an emerging trend. Many of our customers that have traditionally relied on us for the purposes of data protection are now very interested in understanding insights and analytics around file movement, right? And being in our business really puts us in the prime spot to be able to detect anomalies around data movements, whether they be the personal USB keys or the personal clouds, things that are traditionally hard to monitor via IT, but those are just some of the problems that we're helping our customers solve today. So ultimately, our mission is we want to help secure your ideas so that you can protect your growth overall. So again, enough with Code 42. I think at this point we want to hand things over to Chris with Brewster.
Yeah, Chris, if you could take it away, please.
Well, thanks, Abik and Nick. My name is Chris Hafner. I'm IT support analyst here at Brewster Academy. Like many in educational IT, I wear a bunch of different hats. So sometimes I'll be titled technology coordinator or systems engineer. The beautiful piece is I am the Jamf Pro and Code 42 administrator here for our users. To give you an idea of the landscape that we're looking at as we kind of break into the discussion today about what we manage and how we manage it. We are a long-time running one-to-one Apple laptop school. We've been one-to-one for 25 years. So far as we know, that makes us the longest or one of the longest running one-to-one technology programs on the planet. A full rollout on those in 1993. We have roughly 365 students year to year. We're about 360 this year with some dorm changes that we have. 57 full-time teachers, and a little bit over 600 managed Mac OS devices, about 650 right now, and roundabouts 150 iOS and Apple TV or tvOS devices managed by yours truly. To speak about the Academy itself, Brewster Academy is an independent, private, co-educational boarding and day school serving grades 9 through postgraduate. We really pride ourselves on this teaching methodology that we call the Brewster model, which is a very student-centric learning model that we've developed over the years. It's not so dissimilar from the way that in the U.S. we run middle schools as far as organizing teams of teachers and so on and so forth. But the important point is that we really try to have a very intentional and well thought out integration of existing technologies and new and emerging technologies. Our campus, which I'll admit is one of my favorite reasons for working here. We have 80 acres in beautiful Wolfboro, New Hampshire on the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee, known as the oldest summer resort in America, and the picture that you're looking at here is almost all of our campus towards the front and lakeside. Really, really beautiful. But most importantly, our students. We have this year 360 or so students. We have a few more coming in mid-year. About 80% of those are boarding, 20% a day. And as of right now, our students represent 23 states in the U.S. and 21 foreign countries. The people that we have to serve those, as I mentioned before, we have 57 full-time teachers, giving us on paper a teacher ratio of 6 to 1. Actually, we find that a classroom ratio of 12 to 1 is a little bit more effective. But we have a lot of one-on-one and two-on-one teaching environments through an academic support program that we have, and we have dedicated teachers for that. So when you put that all out on paper, it looks like a 6 to 1 ratio. But we support 6 faculty teams, 2 for each of our grades moving up, with the exception of freshmen. And the folks that you're looking at here are our IT team, IT staff. On the left, you have myself, and then our Director of Information Technology, Peter. We have an intern, Allison, that was with us all summer long. She was really fantastic. Our help desk technician, Stacy. Our database developer, Wes, who's actually shifting into more of a computer science and robotics role, and Eric on the end, who is our network engineer. These are the people that support the broad infrastructure that we have. But what we're going to talk today is we're going to talk about how through the course of this move into modern one-to-one computing and BYOD, with some of the circumstances that we have to deal with incoming students and their technology and preparing them for class, led us to not only Jamf software and Code 42, but how we could then use those technologies and use our own philosophy to create what we think is a fantastic culture of self-service, user empowerment, and technology self-reliance. To talk about that circumstance and focusing on self-reliance and continuing to have a very personal connection to technology, as I think more and more businesses well outside the educational sphere are starting to understand nowadays, is really important how we interact with everything moving forward. Some 7 years or so ago, we had our academic boards decide that we wanted to shift to a BYOD integration. Previous to that, we had provided leasing options for Apple computers through IT. We had done resale. We had done these cascading assignments of computers. And I could get into explaining all of that, but I think it's kind of irrelevant now. We had our school management team come up to us and say, okay, we know that we've kept all our computers all summer long, and we know that IT does everything for everybody and preps everything for everybody, but instead, we've decided just to tell the students to bring their computers, and you need to prep them all, before they get to class. And by the way, you don't have the summer to prep all of those things, and so on and so forth. So, after we got over a little bit of our own shock and trying to think about how we were going to condense 3 months worth of work into what was 2 days and now 1 day, we found it was a fantastic opportunity to start to leverage some of the technologies that we had heard about through things like Jamf software at the time, and a little bit later Code 42. We were able to bring these technologies, and as we did, we suddenly realized that we could give the users the power to control most of their own technology destiny here at Brewster Academy, while still serving all of the needs that we had, increasing that comfort, to bring in their own technology within some guidelines, and it positioned IT to be more of a guide to dealing with technology and being successful there, as opposed to kind of guarding it off and making sure the users didn't break anything. So we have a slide coming up here where I've got a fun quote, and we'll go over it in a second, and that's, you can have a solution to every problem, but if your users can't find it or don't want to use it, then what good were they? And how did we get the users to go there? we talk about carrots, and in a minute I'll explain to you that carrots to me started with printers, but you always want to give your users a reason to move to whatever new technology or go look at whatever it is that you want to look at, and in doing that you need to understand your people. You need to have a process to integrate technology in a way that does not outwardly disrupt their lives. For us, it's all about customer service and user enablement. We spend, as an IT team, a lot of time actually going to faculty meetings, teacher meetings, department breakouts to understand really what's happening in our classrooms, what's happening, in our user meetings, the things that our constituents are thinking about. Our help desk technician, Stacy, we hired specifically with zero technical background, none. Because quite honestly, she provides a real great sanity check for us. We can come up with all these great technologies and these great policies and procedures and put them in, and if Stacy turns and looks at us and go, 300 people are going to be at my doorstep every morning because they're not going to understand it because they're not IT people. That has been absolutely huge for us. So as we get into talking more specifically about how we integrate new technologies and integrate change policies and so on and so forth, it really comes back to that dedication to customer service, to remembering that we're here to empower our users, and our users know at many times better than we do what they need, when they need it, and how they need it. And to bring those both together, we've found this old slide, this great sweet pair of Code 42 and Jamf software. We were talking about this a little bit ahead of time. These two technologies really helped us solve a number of problems for users. Jamf software allowed us to bring high-speed imaging to bear, user self-service, the ability to directly manage pretty much anything we wanted in most of the ways that we wanted to with the technology that we had, to give us a huge amount of flexibility in how we delivered solutions to our users. And Code 42 to give our users a very simple, nearly zero touch, and on our IT end, a secured and customizable backup experience. We are a hybrid installation through Code 42. We have all of our data hosted in their cloud, but we manage and host all of our encryption keys here on hand. For Jamf software, we are self-hosted. We can talk about equipment and the way that we leverage all of that later if you folks want. But to focus on how we drove our users in the first place to starting to be a little bit more self-reliant, to be a little bit more empowered, we developed a few different best practices. In some of those best practices, and I think we're just a slide before where you're at right there, or maybe not. We did talk about change a lot. Change is hard. I think we're kind of advancing through a few of the slides, but this is a really beautiful picture that's totally fine. One of the first things that we did is we started putting a lot of the low-hanging fruit into self-service. We moved all of our printer installations there, all of our software updates, optional installs, all of the Adobe Creative Suite. We light off a help desk ticket submission through self-service, File Vault 2 policies. For users, bringing new computers into the fray. All of our administrators are encrypted right from the get-go. But what this allowed us to do was really empower our users so that when they needed something, rather than trusting in IT to have set everything up for them, which sometimes isn't always the case, it allowed them to have complete control over their technology destiny here. They need a printer, you jump on in, you add the printer you need. You don't have to ask anybody. You're ready to start backing this one up on Code 42 because you're not one of our admin users where we're forcing the backup over Code 42. Great, you can go in there and just light it off, and that really makes our users very, very comfortable with our technology, very comfortable with the change process. which I find is really important because change is hard. We have this old adage, the only constant is change. We're always replacing user devices. We're moving through productivity suites. We change, endpoint security policies. We change encryption policies, and these things can really be difficult, for our users to deal with if they're kind of jerked through the process. So even taking, required implementations and giving the user a little bit of flexibility over the beginning of those. For example, when we started dealing with File Vault 2 encryption, we had, users that were a little bit skeptical, and we gave them a couple of months to kind of start getting into that. We monitored and reminded them in the background, and it was really a beautiful process. In the end, we had a great technology solution. We had a great way of distributing it, and we managed to distribute it in a way that our users enjoyed and they trusted. And over time, that allows us to build, that trust with us as IT, allows us to build an adoption cycle, which we'll talk about in a second, and make sure that we're continuing to carry our users forward without being heavy-handed, and making sure they really feel, well taken care of. Now, new technology is something that every IT department and every institution and every business has to deal with. We actually have a policy of going through regular major annual upgrades. With the school year here, we have a natural ebb and a flow to the year that allows us to really capitalize on that time change, almost like we change seasons, we change operating systems, and so on and so forth, and we allow our users to get used to that. But when we're really identifying new technologies, we make absolutely sure that we start with our end users, or our administrative groups, or our teaching departments, or whatever department or group it is that have identified an issue that we're trying to find a solution for. We make sure to start with them. And then once we've identified that, and once IT has kind of evaluated it for basic legality, security issues, functionality, roadmap, so on and so forth, we can then sit down with a group of those constituents in a pilot group. Sometimes we'll run multiple pilot groups and expand through, and then during this period we can set aside budgetary needs and put that in a process, and make sure that everything still fits in with our goals as an academy, whether it's a technology that we're teaching broadly, or if it's just handling a microcosm of users. And once we've identified all that, then we have a real simple way to roll it out. We have a pilot group and a user group or department, that's really there to champion the technology and also help users as we move through. Because as we're empowering users, as users are not showing up at the help desk anywhere near as much as they used to, sometimes they become their own help desk, and that's okay. They're not necessarily shadow IT, as long as all the processes are supported. The more of those processes that you can put in self-service, the better. Actually, it's kind of interesting because I had said earlier, our help desk tech is not an IT person. So anytime that we build an IT policy and make it available for her, often those features are made available to the rest of our users until we've either come up with a better automation for that, better solution for that, or find that it's unnecessary. Now, with all that said, all of these things work really well, and I hope that we're going to get a bunch of good questions to talk about maybe some of the specifics of all of this. But we have a future goal here as we continue to work with Jamf software and Code 42. And this is actually a very near goal. I should have this wrapped up in the next several months. We are Apple Enterprise Connect customers. We do not bind our computers to Active Directory, though we have Active Directory and Radius and a variety of other authentication sources. But we use Apple's Enterprise Connect to Kerberize our machines and to synchronize our Active Directory passwords with our local accounts. And that works beautifully well. I can't talk much more about that, but I can say that as we move forward, one of the things that we're going to be wrapping up is turning our Mac experience a little bit more, for lack of a better term, Chromebook-like, in that when we have users logging into their computer, engaging with Enterprise Connect, we're having going to have, I should say, those credentials passed over to Code 42, and get to a point where when we have a user that has, a machine that may have an issue come in and need to get a loaner, it would be brilliant to be able to just hand that over, and in your older traditional Active Directory style or Chromebook style, have them log into the computer and everything just start downloading without ever having been bound to Active Directory. So that will kind of wrap up the bit that I had to talk about here on self-service and user autonomy.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. What a just wonderful story about Brewster Academy and having these technologies all come together to make a great experience. Excuse me, great experience for your students and for your faculty. Just to recap here, of course, on the Jamf Pro side of things for doing device management, Jamf Pro can kind of do the entire life cycle from deploying out the computers through setting up the correct settings, getting the right apps on there, gathering extensive inventory data, ensuring things are secure. And of course, what Chris talked a lot about is using that self-service app catalog to deploy apps out so that your users can be self-sufficient, so that they can get the things that they need without having to bug IT all the time to get them. Just some technical details on the Jamf Pro server side of things. You can host your server in the cloud if you'd like to, and if you do so, it's very easy, automatically upgrade whenever we come out with updates, and we use AWS as our infrastructure. If you'd like to do it on premise, you can certainly do that as well too. Very lightweight server. It's just requires MySQL database and Tomcat. Chris, you mentioned earlier you have your Jamf Pro server on premise, correct? Chris? We did talk about it earlier, and Chris does have his server on premise, and he can talk about that later on in the Q&A if need be. And, of course, Jamf does support the different Apple programs and services that are out there, from device enrollment program to deploying your devices without having to touch them, VPP for volume purchase program. And, of course, if you're a school, which probably a lot of our audience is here, it's those two programs wrapped up inside of something called Apple School Manager, which we fully support as well. And we support all these great third-party integrations that are out there. So directory services, if you're choosing to bind or not bind, doing single sign-on, Systems Center if you want to share inventory data there, Cisco ICE and their Fastlane service, ServiceNow for sharing inventory data into ServiceNow, and a very extensive API. And, of course, our very close partners that happen to be in our building, actually, which is really cool, and that we work with a lot, is Code 42.
Yeah, and one of the things that Chris had mentioned earlier was this very user, people-centric approach to IT, which I really love hearing about, because one of the more frequently asked questions we have is, if you're providing all of this functionality around data protection and visibility, well, that must mean multiple layers of agents or web apps. And the good news for our customers is that everything that we've talked about, everything that you see on the screen here, is made possible by one lightweight agent that sits on the endpoint. So think of a non-intrusive, non-disruptive experience for your users, and the power of protecting that data every 15 minutes and being able to provide forensic as well as security insights if something were to happen. But the idea of a single agent is something that is huge for our customers, and is something that we'd love to talk to you more about should there be more questions around Code 42.
Great. Now, to wrap up just with some next steps, of course, if you're interested in the device management side of things, check out jamf.com. A lot of great resources there. Love to reach out to you. Of course, if you're interested in the backup side of things, check out code42.com. Of course, they would be love to talk to you about your backup needs. We have some on-demand webinars on jamf.com as well as Code 42. And we've got a really wonderful community out there. If you haven't already, check out Jamf Nation. Over 50,000 IT admins are on Jamf Nation, where you can learn all about the different aspects of deploying Apple devices, deploying software, integrating things like Code 42 with your environment. Wonderful resource, totally open and free. Check it out. And of course, Code 42 has some amazing events that they do. I was at their Evolution event last year. Highly recommend it. Evolution 18 is coming up this year as well too in San Francisco. So check it out. And with that, we will go into some Q&A. So bear with me here while I pull up your guys' chats and any questions. Again, please feel free to send anything that you'd like to know in here. So we've got some quick questions here about Apple School Manager integration. So that is certainly something that we do support on the Jamf side of things. So if you are a school, I highly recommend that you sign up for Apple School Manager. It's a free program, and you can do so at school.apple.com. And once you do that, you will be able to integrate that all inside of your Jamf Pro instance. And I can just show you real briefly where you would do something like that. So here is Jamf Pro. If you haven't seen it before, very easy user interface. I can just navigate to like my computers or mobile devices. But in this case, setting up Apple School Manager integration, I would go into my settings here. And I've got the ability to like add my device enrollment program token or my VPP token, and I can also turn on education support as well too, which is our Apple School Manager support. So those two programs kind of link together if you are doing that. Let's see here. Got a couple other questions about. There's a great one about backup and kind of how Jamf and Code 42, you can do some of the different reporting there. So Chris, maybe you might want to talk about how you've integrated Code 42 and Jamf together, and specifically like doing some reporting on the backup status of your students' devices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way that we deal with reporting of backup status, particularly to our users, as I'll talk about, because for us in IT, I actually really like the built-in Code 42 reporting daily emails. I find those are really super useful and concise. But for users, we have a couple of different extension attributes that can notify them if we have some sudden drops, or if they've had a network that they've blocked, say a home network, and they've been not backing up for a week or so. Beyond that, we have a Code 42. I used to call them widgets, or links in their sidebar of self-service that actually gives them a quick look at what their backup percentage is. I find that most users tend not to go there. Self-service gets up and runs. I should say Code 42 gets up and runs, and if they feel like checking, they just click on in, click on out, and that's about the long and the short of it. What usually happens is when they're starting to get their files back, say they've lost a hard drive or had a computer stolen, and that it's a very simple, one button get files to restore back to the computer. It's brilliant.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for answering that, Chris, and thanks for the question. Let's see. Got another good question here about iPads and managing iPads and how to handle the backing up of iPads. We all know, of course, like the consumer side of things, you can use iCloud to handle backups for iPads and data there. Chris, you want to maybe talk a little bit about how you specifically manage your iOS devices and then handle the data on those guys?
Sure. Our iOS devices essentially come in three flavors, right? And by that, what I mean are iPads, tvOS, and iPhones in how we deal with them, because they all serve completely different purposes for us, and I know they're completely different products. But by that, what I mean is, at TPOS, we don't have any data that we really care to back up, so I won't bother with that. But we have about 86 of those that we use for presentation. iPads. The iPads that we have are managed by they have classes configured in Apple School Manager. They're managed by our Jamf integration as far as that goes, but we allow our departments to deploy applications to them through Apple School Manager and the classes. They have managed Apple IDs for each of those, and those are natively backed up into iCloud. There's not too much data that goes onto those, but what's there is backed up. And for our iOS devices that are primarily iPhones, those tend to be with our school administrators, safety folks, and folks that we otherwise care an awful lot about their data. And for those, we have those all backing up through iCloud. And we have those all secured, managed through the Jamf Pro MDM.
That's great. That's great. So we got another question here just about infrastructure. Chris, I know you mentioned earlier that you have your Jamf Pro server on premise, but then also your Code42 server is a hybrid model. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the infrastructure that you're using to manage all that?
Yeah. So actually, the Code42 infrastructure I'll talk about first because it's really super simple. We really wanted to utilize the very fast and powerful backup servers that Code42 has, and we are, as always, concerned about our users' privacy and making sure that we can be as protected as we possibly can. So in the virtual environment that we run here, we host a key server for Code42, so we maintain all the encryption keys, even though all of the data is stored out in Code42's cloud. Even though I trust them implicitly, my lawyers don't. So we maintain all of those keys. The users can't tell the difference. The installation was mind-numbingly simple as far as server infrastructure for this kind of a thing goes. It was just a VM with some easy software that runs Windows 2012 R2 server for that one. The Jamf Pro environment, when I began building it those 7 years ago, I may have gone slightly over the top. I'll let you know that my test environment for the latest version of Jamf Pro 10 runs rather well on a Mac Mini. Mind you, I'm not serving hundreds of computers out of that, but all by itself. My production environment, however, is 3 Mac Pros. We're all on the Mac side of things, although in the future I may shift some of those services. We may look at possibly hosting the JSS or moving that onto a separate Linux box, which would be my preference. The Mac OS box is they're a little old school. They're the old if you were to turn them sideways, 4U big aluminum towers that I have some really fantastic RAID cards in, and some still spinning platter Cheetah 15K drives, all RAID 0. It's all for really high I/O output, as it was 6-7 years ago, because we have this really crazy demand that we have 350 machines in a day when students in a rotation. We're testing class sign-up, athletics things, photos, you name it. It's actually pretty well half insane. But between all of those, with the redundancy, we're able to get through those and chew through those really easy. However, the last I checked, that was nearly identical infrastructure as to SAP, which is a much larger company than we are. So this stuff can run pretty efficiently, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
That's great. Thanks, Chris, for detailing that infrastructure there. let's see. We got another good question here, kind of a popular topic, and it relates to imaging and provisioning new Macs. So we at Jamf, we've talked a bit about how imaging is sort of fading away. Chris, wondering if we can get your thoughts on just kind of what your provisioning process looks like right now for deploying a new Mac and getting all the appropriate software on there, including the Code 42 agent.
Sure. This is a controversial topic of sorts amongst IT folks that manage and deploy and reprovision Macs. I really encourage you to get on Jamf Nation, and you'll start to see all of the back and forth over this. So, a long time ago, we were one of those shops that did a lot of monolithic imaging. That was fast. Wasn't the best way to do anything, but it was really fast. And then we kind of, through the power of, Jamf Pro, we shifted to modular imaging process using some great tools through Jamf and through others that we found on Jamf Nation to really deploy unbooted operating systems, throw things out there. There are a lot of companies really shifting to a full, zero image deployment. Where they're having, computers purchased through a DP show up, wherever the user's building or department of house is, and then having all of their policies load in the background. But the reality of reprovisioning devices is a little bit interesting. And we do a lot of reprovisioning, meaning that when we get a student with a BYOD computer, or we're replacing a computer, reassigning it to somebody else, it's not quite as clean as being able to go, oh, well, here's my pristine computer, and it's fresh with DEP and so on and so forth. As we shift into dealing with the differences between APFS file structure and HFS Plus, generally journaled, and a couple of different types of hard drives, I'm looking at a really unique and interesting challenge coming up into the next year, where I'll have students coming in where we're going to need to bring them up to High Sierra, and we're going to need a process of essentially reloading an operating system in a different manner on HFS Plus machines than on APFS machines because of a variety of different firmware installers and upgrade packages and things like that are now part of the new suite. Apple is really pushing users, or I should say institutions, back to a block image, back to system image utility and things like that. I'm paying very close attention to a really unique series of threads on 1013 deployment through Jamf Nation, where we've got some folks creating some really great scripts to be able to use Casper imaging in a netboot environment to differentiate between machines and hardware to still provide images in that way. I have to admit, the dream of moving to an environment where macOS may be as easy to manage as iOS in this particular case would be really cool. We're not there yet. We're kind of on the way, and I'm really thankful to have a company like Jamf, to help move us forward. In the meantime, I think we're all going to be talking about just that process. However, I can tell you that we are happily and successfully deploying 10.13.2 as of this morning in both APFS and HFS Plus on our test server. But I still have some development work before I'm ready to have 350 students show up and image their own machines and know that they're all going to get the right stuff next September.
That's great. That's great, Chris. That's awesome that you're already testing 10.13 too. I mean, that just literally came out today. So that's good on you for getting on top of that. I'll pause here to see if anyone else has any questions to submit. And I'll also ask if there's any final thoughts from the group here. I'll start with the Beak. Any final thoughts from the Code 42 side of things?
Well, it's always great to be a part of these and listen to the questions and most particularly just hear from customers that are experiencing Jamf as well as Code 42 and the benefits that they're achieving. So it's been great being a part of this. Again, thanks for having Code 42. But yeah, I think other than that, if any of you out there have any questions, feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to get you additional information.
Yeah, and I will echo that as well, too. Again, always nice to work with technology partners here, especially when we have a lot of overlapping customers and vision for how we want to serve our customers. It's great to have work closely with Code 42, and it's really great to have Chris here to tell his story as well, too. Chris, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Other than my general thanks for all of you, I hope this can be a motivator to really get you to take a look at dealing with self-service and helping users get what they need without having to absolutely micromanage everything. Let them have a little control. But that aside, get on Jamf Nation. If you haven't been there, go there. It doesn't matter whether you use Jamf software at all or Code 42. They will help move you forward with the Mac.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.